So welcome to today's webinar, Shine the Media Spotlight on Your PH Story. I'm joined by some really wonderful speakers. Jeannette Morrill, who's a patient and pH-aware campaigner. She's been in the media multiple times talking about her story, but also just raising pH awareness and talking about the disease. She's been very creative and has come up with multiple ways to just continue getting her story out there and getting pH out there. We're also joined by Mollie Katz, who is the Vice President of Community Engagement here at PHA. She has been working in health-related public relations for more than 20 years, and I'm very happy to have her here to go over some of the things we're going to talk about, pitching your story and what to do in an interview. And then, so by process of elimination, my name is Elizabeth Williams. I'm the Grassroots Campaigns Manager. One of the programs that I manage at PHA is our Grassroots Media Program, the PH Aware campaign. As you see, Jeannette is a member. So basically what I do is I help campaign members who are interested in raising awareness via sharing their story in the media, and I provide resources to help them do that. Press kits, one-on-one attention, and obviously webinars just like this one. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. So our agenda, first I'm going to talk about 2011's Awareness Month. It was a very successful month, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and then look towards 2012. Then Mollie will talk about sharing your story and working with reporters, so how to frame your story, how to pitch your story, and what to do during an interview. And then Jeannette will share her experiences in working with the media and maybe get some of your juices flowing and get you thinking about ways that you can also get involved in talking to reporters. And then usually my favorite part of all of these webinars is the question and answer. So think of any questions that you want to ask and any stories that you want to share. Those are welcome during that time. So keep those in mind, and I'll unmute the lines then so that you can share those. So let's take a look back at last year. 2011, for the entire year, PHers had the most media stories in the news. And I would say that really crescendoed in November for Awareness Month. So as you see, PHers scored 37 PH-focused media victories in a variety of formats: newspapers, radio, TV. And that's more than one a day. So that's great for raising awareness in communities all around the United States. I'm going to point out both of the photos on here. They're taken from one on the left, the Blue Lips Ladies. That was a TV broadcast. Patty Kaiser, I worked with her to get media coverage for her upcoming special event, which was the beginning of November of last year. You can see there's a bunch of baskets that she was creating for her special event in St. Louis, and I worked with her to get her story in the news. And on the right, you will see Michael Rivera, and his story, it was in a newspaper in Corpus Christi, and it basically just focused on, these ribbons that he was making. It looks like he's wearing about 5 of them. He was very excited about raising awareness last year, and he reached out to a reporter to share, his activities. So I picked these 2 in particular out of the 37 because I feel like they're great examples of how 2 members of the community are taking an activity that they were already doing to raise awareness in November and amplifying its impact by sharing that with the entire community via newspapers, radios, and TV broadcasts. So while you're listening to Mollie and you're listening to Jeannette and you're thinking about what you want to do to get your story in the news and get PH in the news, sort of maybe one thing that will help is to think about what you're already planning on doing for Awareness Month. Are you hosting a special event? Are you hosting a Awareness Month themed support group? Are you going to set up an informational table somewhere, or maybe make ribbons like Michael did? So just look for those opportunities to share your activities and your story this November. So looking towards Awareness Month this year, I talked about the successes last year, but I think it's always worth reminding everyone why it's important to raise awareness by talking to reporters and sharing your story, why that's important to the PH community, and why we should continue to make 2012's Awareness Month even more successful as far as media goes. So sharing your story helps the entire community. One, PH community grows with every news story. When you share your story with reporters, it helps end isolation. It gets more people to your support group meeting. It gets more people to your special event. And maybe it just creates a connection between you and another patient who lives near you who had no idea that there were other PH patients near them. It ends that isolation, and it sort of creates, a bigger PH community. The second reason, this is free promotion for your upcoming event or your support group. I mean, free. Did I mention it's free? So this is a great way to cast your net a little wider and get more people involved in whatever it is that your special event, your support group, and make those things more successful. Number 3, you're educating undiagnosed patients and also diagnosed patients, their lives. And then also, fourth, it helps save lives by educating medical professionals. So many of you may have heard about the Sometimes It's PH campaign. I think a lot of people in the PH community have started calling it the Zebra campaign. Basically, it's based on the premise that medical professionals, when they go through medical school and they're learning how to diagnose issues, they're taught when they hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So practically that means if they are seeing a patient who is having trouble breathing, maybe diagnose them with asthma. So the point of the Sometimes PH campaign and the point of the zebras is we're trying to ask medical professionals to think about the fact that it could be PH. It could be asthma, but it also could be PH, and just to consider that when they're going through diagnosis. Campaign was created because it was taking too long for patients to get a PH diagnosis. So the goal of this campaign is to reduce the time between patients' experiences first symptoms and then to their diagnosis by right heart catheterization. So sharing your story, this really ties well with sharing your story with reporters and in the media. It's a great way to participate in the campaign and improve medical professional education. So, if you want to just take a look at some of the quotes that I have up on the screen and think about your own diagnosis stories. Everyone's is different, but everyone's is worth sharing. Mollie's going to talk a little bit more about brainstorming different pitch ideas and story ideas with reporters, and Jeannette will share her experiences. But one pitch for Awareness Month is basically just to share your diagnosis story and to talk about the Sometimes It's PH campaign. And then finally, I just want to make a quick pitch. We're talking about pitches so much in this webinar. I just want to make a pitch for the PH Aware campaign. So you're going to hear a lot of great tips and tidbits from Mollie and from Jeannette. But one other great resource for advice and help is your fellow PHers and PH Aware campaign members. So some of the things, when you get involved with the PH Aware campaign, you get plugged into Media Matters emails, and those are monthly emails where you get updates on successes and maybe different pitch ideas that you could be working on throughout the year. The PH Aware email group is a discussion forum via email. It's a Yahoo group, and members of that group, they send emails back and forth to each other about different topics. I'm having trouble getting this story in the news. What do you suggest? Or some members like to share their media successes, which is great. And then the so much more is if you are having trouble at any point along the process trying to get your story in the news, you can always contact me. And I realize I don't have my phone number up there. So my email is Elizabeth with an S, ELISABETHW @phassociation.org, and my phone number is 301-565-3004, extension 753. So with that, I will turn things over to Mollie, and I will unmute your line.
Thank you. You can hear me, I'm sure?
Yes,
Good.
yes, we can.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. This is Mollie Katz. I'm delighted that all of you have decided to join us today, and I'm excited about sharing some of the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years in working with the media. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is thinking as you start a process of placing a story, what story will you tell? Very often within PHA, we've urged patients to tell their own personal stories of the disease. And so that might include how you were diagnosed, how long that took, what experiences you've had in coping with the disease, what you've learned, all things of that nature. And I think that personal stories have an incredible power and will never, in a sense, go out of style. They will always be relevant. They will always carry a certain drama and help to educate people in a way that comes in very human terms and is very enjoyable and edifying to read or to hear if you hear it broadcasted, for example. So I think personal stories have been very much the core of the media relations outreach that we've done in PHA and can remain that way. In addition, however, there are some other avenues that you can pursue to get a story, and it might still relate to your personal story or it might not. Sometimes you, as someone wanting to get the attention of the media, might want to be telling the stories of other people who have PH. So for example, we have a mother and daughter on our call today, and I know you live in different communities, so you have different media. But if you did live in the same community, for example, perhaps the daughter may want to tell the story to a reporter of the mother's experiences with PH. So that's another way to go about it. If you are in a support group, you might be hearing incredible personal stories from the people in your support group, and if you get their agreement, perhaps you might be the one who comes to the media and shares what's so interesting about the stories of some of your PH friends. Another area that I think can be told is common challenges that people have with PH. There are lots of ways that PH has changed your lives. It may have to do with what you have to do when you travel, or it may have to do with complications or obstacles that you may have at work, or it may have to do with how you can do family activities or leisure pursuits, for example. There are lots of different elements of your daily life with PH that I think can be of interest to hear about or read about, among others. And one of the reasons for that is that the rest of us who don't have PH also go to work and also pursue hobbies and travel, but we don't have to do it with all of the special arrangements that you have to do it with PH. And so to read about people who are traveling even though they have to take oxygen with them on the plane, for example, or they have to find a way to mix medication when they're on a cross-country road trip, something of that nature. I think for those of us who don't have PH, we say, wow, I'm living my life and I'm doing these things, and sometimes I think my life is really bursting at the brim, but look at this. Here's someone who is still persevering and finding ways to be active and keep their life as full as possible, even though they have this difficult disease. So we'll talk a little bit as we go along about some opportunities to tell stories in that way. Once you've thought about this range of options of stories you might want to tell, you're going to have to narrow your options down because generally you want to just be working on one story at a time. And may I say that if individuals among you might be thinking of multiple storylines, hold on to them. At different times of the year you might want to be working on one more than the other. It might be more relevant because of something that's going on in your community, like a special event, or something else that's happening like a holiday season or something else. So it's to your advantage to have these different storylines in mind, but I think it's going to work best for you if you just are pursuing one at a time. So when you narrow your options, you need to look at what themes have come out in your brainstorming about what story you'll tell. And these are some, on the screen, some examples of the type of stories that might be told. You might think about stories about dedicated caregiving. So if you're in a support group, for example, and you know a couple of patient and caregiver pairs, perhaps you could put their stories together and approach a journalist and say, let me tell you about some really wonderful stories of how families are caring for one another in a situation of a rare lung disease, and then you can go on and explain this, and it becomes not only an opportunity to explain the disease of PH, but also how people are coping with it and how they're going above and beyond to care for one another. I know a couple of you have mentioned special events, and sometimes that can be the catalyst for approaching the media. I think that is a wonderful reason to be approaching the media, and sometimes you can get journalists to do a story just about your event, particularly if it's something that hasn't occurred before. If it's something new in the community, that's a news-making event. If it's something that has been done a couple of years in a row, you might find it's getting a little bit harder sometimes to get media attention if it isn't new. And not to worry, because this is the time when you can think about adding different dimensions to what you want to say at the time of the event. In addition to saying how special events are meaningful, for example, if they're commemorating someone who has died of PH, or how they bring the community together to raise money for a wonderful cause, you might also take that special event and make it the occasion on which to go to the media with a different story. So you might want to tell the story of, for example, pediatric PH, and use that opportunity to showcase some experiences of people in the community, maybe have some doctors or nurses or other professionals interviewed as well, and do that at the time that you're raising money for PH through your special event. What that does is that it gives a journalist more to write about than just the event itself, and it keeps the media coverage of a repeated event, for example, alive as you go through each year and continue and want to find new things to talk about. So within that story will be reflected the facts of what is PH, how common is it in children. It will be reflecting where people can get care and what kind of treatment they have. And so all of those elements will continue to educate the public and raise awareness while you are also linking it to your special event and making that the time hook for the journalist to come out and do the story. Other options you might think about might include important health issues. And there are multiple health issues, of course, within the broad disease of PH. One of them that we're talking about a lot this Awareness Month is misdiagnosis, and how frequent that is, and how much that delays the process that unfortunately our patients can get sicker and sicker while they are going through health care that doesn't work until they get a correct diagnosis and find proper treatment. So that is an issue that we very much want to shine a light on, particularly this year and going forward. Another important health issue might be ways medical progress has helped patients. For example, I was pitching a story for PHA this week, and we were talking about a 14-year-old girl in Philadelphia and how over her very short lifespan, she has been on different types of treatment for PH, and that this experience reflects how much progress we are seeing in the research and understanding and drug development for this disease. So through one person's experience, you can make that a mirror on other things that are happening in the world of PH. And there are lots of other important health issues that you could list here, depending on your own experience or what you've observed of those around you. For example, we see a number of young mothers who are diagnosed with PH after they've had children. And that raises a whole other set of issues because being a mother is a demanding job, and of course it's more difficult when you have PH. So lots of other situations in health can arise, and these can be considered elements of your story. Okay, I'm waiting for my next slide to come up. Whoops. The next thing you want to do is what I call framing your story. You've come up with broad ideas of what story you want to tell, and now what you want to do is set it in context of a broad theme. And a broad theme is basically, like a picture frame. It kind of encapsulates the whole idea, and it really helps you to have a frame, an idea that you can quickly convey to a journalist that summarizes where you want to go with the story. And one of the things you need to think about sometimes is that journalists don't have all that much time to listen to your pitch or to read about what you may be able to send them to get them interested in the story. And so the more concise and very to the point you can be, the better off it is for you in keeping the attention of the journalist. So I think the frame is very helpful in that. So here are some sample frames. They're very broad, and then more specific ideas can come within them. So one is themes that touch emotions. I'm sure all of you have heard very emotional stories just by being in the world of PH. Overcoming adversity is a big one, and that can be demonstrated in many different ways. Often we hear of people who find really a renewed life purpose in fighting PH. This is something that we always love hearing about at PHA, and I think it has a lot to do with the energy that keeps this organization going, but that it's very difficult to deal with such a rare and a complex diagnosis. But we find that a lot of people really ultimately conquer that by pulling themselves into the effort of fighting PH by doing media, by contacting their congressmen, being support group leaders, or doing a variety of other things that are helping the PH community. So that's always an inspiring story, and I think inspiring stories will always be popular. The power of patient-to-patient support is also another really interesting theme that I've seen that plays to the emotions. And what I mean by that is that through a number of our support group leaders and through some other people that I've spoken to involved in PH, I very often hear really a deep passion about how much patients have been able to touch one another's lives, and how meeting even one other patient or being able to communicate with that one other patient really fights the isolation of having a rare disease. And so I think there are many, many stories that could be told either through your own experience or in the experience of those you know, where patient-to-patient support has made a huge difference, maybe in an emergency, maybe in a situation where it just seemed there were no answers and someone else's experience was instructive. I think sometimes even within that we see longer-term patients are very much a sign of hope for more newly diagnosed patients. So some of those stories I think also are very much appeal to the emotions and therefore make them stories that the media will want to tell. Another sample frame might just be themes of coping well. And I referred to this a little bit before in terms of daily activities and how these have been affected by your PH. But once again, I think it's inspiring, it's hopeful, it's a positive story to tell how people have conquered their PH and how they continue on and can go to work, for example, or how they manage to take care of their children or do other things with the family that they would like to do even though PH makes it harder. Another area that we've been talking about here in the office and will be communicating about a little bit more with you is what I would call modifying holiday traditions to work around your PH. And we've heard some interesting examples of how people have just made a few changes so that they can still keep the holidays special but not have to exhaust themselves in the ways that are very difficult with PH. So for example, we've heard from one PH patient who always loved having perfect holiday decorations at home. But since she wasn't able to do that one year, she just let her 5-year-old daughter decorate the tree all by herself. And she said her daughter's smile was so big and so proud that it made the holiday extra special for her, even though she had let go of the idea of the perfect decorations. So things like that that may have to do with how you change your cooking patterns or how you change your entertaining patterns, maybe what you do with gift giving, all those sorts of things, I think, again, play into the holiday. We always see holiday stories in the media. There's never a year that goes by that you don't see them. And in fact, journalists plan ahead so that they will have ideas on hand to tell that story anew. And of course, because it comes around every year, they need fresh ideas. And so ideas such as this are a new way to approach the holidays and to both educate about the disease and show how people are persevering. So once you've framed your idea, selected your idea and framed your idea and kind of gotten it in mind, the next thing you need to do is think about actively pitching your idea to journalists. And the pitching process is a very essential step. Basically, without a pitch, you are not going to get to the stage of interviewing, so it's an important middle ground before you can start to tell your story. It's different from interviewing because basically the pitch is a very short, very not too extremely detailed. They're a broad summary that is designed to convince a journalist that this is a story that they should be telling. So advanced planning really helps to take a story that you're thinking of in probably fairly much detail and to really boil it down to a sentence or two so that you can talk about it very concretely. So advanced planning and thinking that through is helpful. When you pitch, you're aiming to inspire that reporter or editor that you're speaking to think, wow, this is a story that's really worth telling. You want to be able to capture their attention quickly so that they get that inspiration right away. You need to convince them that this story is of value to their audience. And that's something that every journalist needs to think about. If I want to report a story, I can suggest a story to my editor, but my editor is only really going to want it to appear if that story is going to do something for the audience. Maybe teach them about something new. Maybe inspire them to by seeing the struggles of others. Maybe tell them about programs in the community that are helpful, etc. So you want to make sure that there's something that story is going to do for the audience, and then you need to be sure that you convey that very well to the journalist. You also need to, as I said, give a quick summary of the theme, which we talked about before, the timeliness, why it should be covered now, and the impact on the audience. When I talk about the timeliness, as we said, a special event is happening on a certain date. So a story could be written at the time of that special event to reflect what's happening with PH. There might be other timely elements to the story as well, such as a holiday story. Maybe you want to do a holiday story around Thanksgiving if that's a time when you've made accommodations in your life to celebrate the holiday despite your PH. You might still be able to do a holiday story if you don't have a Thanksgiving anecdote to tell. Maybe it's a Christmas or New Year's or Mother's Day. Any time of the year you can use that frame or that theme, but you want to make sure that you are conveying to the journalist that this is a time when it really makes sense to tell this story. There are stories that are told that we call evergreen that could be told at any time of the year, like a travel story. But if you give a reporter a time peg, like a busy travel season such as summer vacation time, this is another reason that's going to convince them that you should do this story now because lots of people have travel on their minds and during summer vacation. Let me tell you how it plays out for someone with PH. And the impact on the audience, we've talked about the different roles that a story could play in benefiting the audience, educating them, informing them, etc. So let me say, I'm going to go back a slide for a minute. When you pitch your idea, let me put in your minds a little bit of an image of where the reporter's mind may be at. Very often people will do a pitch by sending an email first to a journalist, which I think is a good idea. It allows them to read it on their own time and with their own attention and doesn't necessarily interrupt them the way a phone call would. So when you write your pitch, you definitely want to write it with putting the main ideas at the top. And when you send the email pitch, you often won't hear anything. And that's pretty normal for journalists because they are inundated with email just as most people are. And even though they saw something they liked, they might not move on it right away. So it does pay to add to your pitch a follow-up telephone call. And in that call, that's when it becomes very important for you to be very brief in explaining what that story idea is about. The way I usually start my pitches is the reporter says, hello, this is John Jones. And I will say, hello, this is Mollie Katz. I don't say anything about who I'm representing or where I'm calling from because I'm going to save that for later. The reason I'm doing that is because the journalist is thinking right now, just as you do when you get a survey company calling you right around dinner time and the phone rings and you're really not that interested in answering the phone, but you do. And in your mind, you're thinking as quickly as you can about everything that is said to you and evaluating immediately, do I need to stay on this call or not? Is there anything on this call that I really need to be involved in because I don't really want to be on the phone? And that is more or less the mindset of a lot of busy reporters who are pushed by their editors to produce X number of stories. And they're like everybody. They're busy at work. And when we call them, we are essentially interrupting them from doing whatever it was that they were already doing. That's the nature of using the phone. And so when they do pick up, you want to be as ready as you can to just identify your name, say you're calling with a story idea. You can ask, is this a good moment for you to talk about it with me? And if they're really busy, they'll have a chance to say, no, I really can't do it right now. At that point, you can ask them when is a convenient time and follow up. If they do want to listen, then you want to launch into, I have a story idea about a young person who's been treated for this rare disease and how all the treatments that she's had in her life reflect the progress that's going on in this area of health. Something general like that that explains what the pieces are. We have a young person. We have that she has a rare disease. We have something about what her story means and how that shows what's happening in the world of rare disease. And all those components come to the reporter's mind at once, and that reporter is very quickly trying to process, do I have the things I need in this pitch that make me think this could be a good story? And if they think that, they're more likely to stay on the phone with you. If they don't think so, they'll probably politely or maybe not so politely end the call quickly. But what you want to be able to do is try to engage them in a brief conversation about this. Hopefully they'll ask a question or you'll have a chance to add some details and see how they're feeling about what you say and let them ask some questions to try to direct it more towards their interests. So once you have, as you're pitching your story, you want to also think about making it easy for reporters to cover your story. Another piece of the calculation that's going on as they listen to you or read your pitch is to figure out, well, this might sound kind of interesting. I wonder how hard it would be for me to have everything I need to do this story, or how would I go about doing this story? So you want to make sure that you are helping them out. And I put this picture on the slide of a silver platter because I always tell people they should try to serve their story idea up on a silver platter so that it's irresistible to the journalist because it's easy to cover. And that means that you have the main facts, the key names and phone numbers handy, email contacts so that you can just give that to them quickly and they'll know who to contact, dates and times if you're working with a special event or something that's happening at a particular time. And you also want to let them know if you have them, you should try to have these things, extras that tell the story. So those might be visuals, like a diagram that might be on one of our PHA DVDs, for example. Some sound if they're in radio. That natural sound always helps to convey what's happening and tell that story in a radio format. So let's say you're doing a holiday story about cooking. You might let the reporter come to your home as you're banging around with the pots and pans and let them hear the sound and put that in the background of the story. You might want to offer photo opportunities so that a journalist can come to wherever you are and photograph whatever you may be doing or who it is you're with, who is part of your story, whether that's a physician or a support group leader or a caregiving situation or whatever it may be. The more that they have to tell that story, not just in words, but in the visuals and the sound, the better off you're going to be. And that's incidentally true even in online media, which is another area that you all might want to try to pursue. In addition to being a print newspaper or being a broadcast TV station, for example, even those news organizations now are online as well. And sometimes they even have additional content online beyond what they would normally share. And so when they go online, they need more pictures, they need more sound, they need to make it lively. Now, when your idea is accepted and it comes down to giving an interview, I'd like to give you a very broad statement to hold in your mind, and that is that an interview is a conversation. It's a conversation with an agenda, and that agenda is your agenda. Many times I'm concerned that when people prepare for an interview or walk into an interview, they are thinking that it's almost like an interrogation and they have to answer every question. When in fact, I think you can feel much more relaxed if you go into the interview realizing that it really is a conversation, that it's you just talking with someone, that you are probably the expert because you're going to be talking about your experiences and your knowledge, and that they're really there to learn from you. But you are also there to tell certain facts and key information because you want that story to contain very important points that will help to educate and raise awareness. When you give an interview, you definitely want to cover the main ideas first. We all have a tendency to want to tell our stories in great detail, and that can be extremely helpful in an interview. But at the beginning, you want to just summarize. And as you go through, let the journalist ask more questions and bring the detail out that the journalist needs. It can be overwhelming to a reporter when lots of details are coming out at once. And of course, you want to have your facts and materials handy so that you can just hand them a visual, a photo, a list of contacts, et cetera, so that that, again, is very easy and that you feel very prepared. I also want you to know that if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer, that is actually fine to say, I don't know. That's a completely honest answer, and it's not necessary for you to feel that you must know every answer to the questions you could be asked. However, if you don't know the answer, trying to find the answer is helpful. So you might offer to help the reporter by looking up an answer or calling PHA and seeing if you can get an answer. And if you do that, just make sure that you follow through. You want to be a good cooperative source for the journalist, so if you find it, quickly follow up and give it to them. If you don't find it, you may want to just send an email later saying, sorry, I couldn't find it. But I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. And the other thing you want to be able to do is refer journalists to other good information sources. So if you don't know, maybe you send them to a doctor or a nurse or to the PHA website or one of the PHA staff. Once you have been interviewed and you've given the person information for the story, you want to follow up, but just a bit, because you want to be careful not to become irritating to the journalist. So I think it's always appropriate to send a brief thank you email and just follow up to see if any more information is needed, because you might be able to assist with that. Certainly ask when the story is likely to appear so that you can follow it. You might want to tell your friends about it, and you might want to post on Facebook that the story is coming out, something like that. And of course, please tell us at PHA that your story is coming out so we can also watch for it in the media monitoring that we do.
Okay, so at this point, thank you, Mollie. And I will unmute Jeannette. I'll unmute your line and have you talk a little bit about your experience in reaching out with media.
Okay. I was diagnosed in 1976 at age 23, 24. So it was quite a while before I started doing any kind of media reporting or trying to get stories. But my first try with the newspapers was in 2004, and I had just started a support group in Bangor. And although I knew there were patients in Bangor and the surrounding area, there was no way that I could reach them. So I thought that by putting an article in the paper, that maybe patients would reach out to me, and that was the desired outcome, and it worked. And I was able to start a group in Bangor and also one in Waterville from just a very small newspaper article. And the following year, a much larger article appeared in the newspaper after I was contacted by a writer from one of the larger papers in Maine. They included pictures in that article. Most importantly, there was a side box that focused on what is pulmonary hypertension. And in that side box, the writer wanted to break the article into two sections, my story and my living with the disease, and also include information about the disease itself. The side box included what pH is. It also told the side effects, the treatment for, and the resources, and all of those things were provided to the readers. I made a conscious effort to explain to the reporter so that she could understand the disease and put it in simple terms, and so that she could convey that same understanding to the readers. This article created an opportunity for 5 or 6 people to contact me, and they started attending support groups and getting appropriate care and treatment for pH, which they wouldn't have been able to be informed if they hadn't read this article. I even made the sports news in that year as a golfer in the Maine State Women's Golf Association tournament.
Hey, Jeannette, sorry, I'm getting messages from some people saying they're having trouble hearing you. So do you think you could speak up a little bit?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
So as a golfer in the Maine State Golf Association, the people I played with had no idea what a serious disease I was living with. And this article was printed in the paper on the morning of the second day of this 3-day event. And I was greeted in the clubhouse by many people asking questions and giving me encouragement. And more importantly, it was another opportunity to raise awareness of pH. In 2008, I took to the papers again as a way to promote my first fundraising golf event. I sent a press release to every newspaper in Maine. And in this press release, there was information about pH and why research funds and raising awareness were so important. The hard part about the press release is that I didn't have any way to know if the papers had printed the press release unless someone else contacted me personally. My next venture was putting my story into print. And as you can see on the screen, it's Living with Pulmonary Hypertension. At the time that the book was published, it was 34 years and counting, and now it's 36 years. I had been writing since 1976, the year of my diagnosis, and in 2010, I self-published. Newspapers picked up on the news, and once again, pH was a topic in the smaller papers and also the larger paper out of Bangor. Several people contacted me. I'm thinking maybe 8 to 10 people, just to find someone to talk about with pH. The book inspired another lady in a nearby town to do a run bike event, which raised almost $2,000 for research. Every time I do something that is connected to pH, I try to get it published in some form of media. The latest article was published on September 5th, 2012, and it was a synopsis of my past living with pH, the upcoming Forum Golf event, and my reception of the 2012 Outstanding PHA Citizen Award. My thought process has changed since that first article. This is not about me. This is about pulmonary hypertension and the lack of patients getting appropriate treatments and timely diagnosis. I have morphed from a shy person who is pretty quiet and reserved to one who wants and needs to fight back against pH. By speaking out, I can actively do something to help raise awareness and funds for research and hopefully help others along the way. My book was a prime example of my change in my thinking. I can't do this. People will think I'm all about myself when truly I wasn't. It was really scary to put all that I have been through out there for anyone who cared to read it. But I realize now it was definitely the right thing to do. I can't tell you how many people I have met because of the book. It actually gives me power over the disease when I see something in print. More people are reading about pH and awareness is being raised. I have talked with reporters who make it easy, and they come with questions and they want specific information. And then there are others who are not quite so organized, and I've had to take the lead and direct them into the information that I want them to get. Being prepared with resources for the writer is an important item to have on hand. I had an outline of what I wanted the reporter to know about pH, to give them some background about the disease. And I think this helped them with their questions for me. One reporter did not do his homework, so I was glad I had the outline because I was able to give him a lot of concise information during my face-to-face interview. And I encourage anyone who has access to any type of media to move forward. You know your motives, and whenever we, the patients, can put our face to pH, we have the potential to help many. And thank you.
Thank you, Jeannette. So let's go ahead and open up. We have, it looks like, about 10 minutes. So I'm going to unmute the lines.
The conference has been unmuted.
So if you have any questions for Jeannette or for Mollie, feel free to answer those now. Actually, I see Marcia has her hand raised. Marcia, do you have a question?
Yes. This is our 6th year for our Fun Walk, and it's going to be bigger and better, light years ahead of the past. But in the past, I've sent press releases. I've done what I can. But being in Dallas, because we're not a small town, you know, we get caught up in unless somebody famous gets it, we're not going to do anything. Do we just keep hounding them and just blanket it? Do we contact people? You know, big cities are tough.
That's true. This is Mollie. I think that's really true, Marcia. And so if you have gotten coverage in the past, you know.
No, we haven't.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You have not?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
I have tried for 6 years, so I'm really dedicated this year to getting something somewhere.
All right. So it might just be that you might be missing a component here or there that might help you to break through in the attention of the media. Where is your event held?
It's going to be in a suburb of Dallas this year, and we're going to have the zebra. I just finished a zebra costume. We're going to have a horse that's painted with purple stripes. And we're going to have a band.
Right.
It's going to be a big deal this year. So we really want to get it at least on TV or in the news.
Right. You definitely have visuals there with the costume and the whole zebra theme. And so even if you just got a photograph in a major newspaper, for example, that would be one way to break through. Right. The other thing is you mentioned that you are holding it in a particular suburb, and it may be that if you narrow your approach to media so that you target those who are more likely to cover that suburb, you might be more successful.
I tried that last year, and when they have these neighborhood sections that come out every Friday, and they have a calendar for the next week, and I sent all that in, everything, and nothing was put out when when that Friday came, and then it's too late because.
Right. Is there any care center, or can you document that there's much of a community of PH patients in your area, that it's not just one or two, for example?
Oh, yes. We have about 60. I had 60. When we combine Fort Worth and Dallas, and this is both of us.
Okay. Well, have you ever rolled that into your pitch to say that there's 60 PH patients, this disease is extremely rare, and yet here in our own Dallas-Fort Worth community we have 60 patients?
Yeah.
And then I imagine that there's also a care center nearby, and that maybe you can play off of that as well, and that not only do we have a fair number of patients, but we also have good sophisticated care, and this is what it's all about.
And we've also got some poster children. We knew that was important, so we put them on our website. So
they don't have to be children, though. They don't have to be children. They can also be adults.
I know, but they always want to know, do children get that? That's what suckers them in.
Right. That does tug the heartstrings, but I think there are also interesting stories, among the adults that might also help you differentiate. I pitched a reporter the other day who had several stories of children very sick with rare diseases, she told me. And so, that made it harder for me because there are other stories like that. So if you differentiate by going with an adult, that might help you too.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the group?
Hello?
Oh, hi there.
Hi, this is Jeannette. I have a question just because this is really the first time I'm meeting on this topic. With regards to information to give people, I mean, my mom and I have always said, well, there's so many aspects of it. We don't want to give people wrong medical information and whatnot. Do you have pre-printed materials or flyers that we can use at our events, so that we're not narrowing down the information of what we're talking about when we mention the disease?
Yes, and I don't have the a web address up online, but if you go through, if you go to PHA's website, phassociation.org, there is a store page where you can order things, free items, informational items for your upcoming special event. When would that special event be happening?
The first week in November.
Okay, so
it'll be like the first Saturday. So what is that, like November 6th or something like that?
The
but I'm not
because
even
that's
looking
when ours is.
Yeah, I'm just looking for even if it's like a one-pager that helps me not have to narrow down information, but gives them a nice broad overview so I don't say something incorrectly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you also up on your screen you should see one of the resources, the second one, which is the online press room. So if you go to phassociation.org/pressroom, there is information about what PH is.
And then I can just print out a handout too, or have like something to discuss off of, in other words.
Definitely. But if you want to get in touch after this phone call, I can help you get other items together depending on how big your depending on what you're looking for.
Okay. Yeah, all I was really looking for was something that was printed by the association so that it had really the backing of, of substantial organizations say this is real. This is just something that we, have in the family, but this is, this is a real, rare thing, and this is really, what it's about.
Yeah.
Can I make a remark also to, I think was Marcia's question? With regards to getting coverage this year versus last year. I'm not familiar, of course, with your event and your site and all that, but when you distribute your information this year, using photographs from last year that people are allowed to reprint might also be a boost.
Oh, yes, that's all over our page.
Yeah, showing that an event had already taken place.
And our website.
Yeah, and issuing those directly to media. In some cases, they'll run that without even having discussed it with you because they have the image and you've given them permission to reprint.
Right. Thank you.
So, but thanks. I'll go to that website and see what there is and see if that fits any of our requirements. Just to have a handout there.
Yeah. We also have a brochure. Which is very concise, called Understanding pH, which we can provide for you, and that's a good summary. And we have a DVD that it's 20 minutes long, but it's in about 4 short segments, which also very neatly explains what the disease is, what the treatments are, how to live with the disease, etc. And there are diagrams in there that journalists may want to use, and everything is ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, we have a few more minutes if there are any other questions from anyone in the group. Well, okay. So I talked a little bit about the second resource, the online press room. So this is a great place for you to send medical professionals, members of the media. It's got a lot of information about pulmonary hypertension, what it is, the different populations that it affects, and even a sheet about what PHA does. It's got some videos. It's a good page for you. It's a great resource so you can focus on sharing your story. You can send them to this page for all of the technical information about pH. The first is our online media guide. So this webinar I think has been really instructive, and a lot of tips and ideas have been shared about how you can get your story in the media. If you missed anything, like I said earlier in the program, this webinar is recorded and it will be provided online later and emailed out to you. But there's also the online media guide that also has a few other tips that can help you along the way to get your story in the news. So if you go to phassociation.org/awareness/media guide, you'll find a bunch of good ideas there. And like I said earlier, if you're, maybe think of a question after this webinar is finished, you think of it later today, go ahead and give me a call or shoot me an email, and I can help you through any of your questions, any issues that you're having reaching out to the media, or even to find out more information about the pH Aware campaign. Just contact me at phaware@phassociation.org. And my phone number is 301-565-3004, extension 753. So at this point, I will thank both Jeannette and Mollie for being on the call, and thank everyone else. Thank you, everyone.